This chapter is about truing the wheel, and I'm going to introduce you into some techniques for not only correcting radial and lateral errors, but solving two problems at once. Here is a wheel I'm in the process of building, and the wheel is definitely going from left to right, a little bit of lateral error, but not too much up and down radial error. Let me orient you into some of the slides we're going to be looking at. Here's the cross-section of a wheel. There's the hub, and there's the rim. We put some spokes in our wheel, and then we put the wheel in a truing stand, and those blue lines represent the risers or uprights of the truing stand. And here are my truing stand calipers. In our graphics, this is the same thing as this. We're going to look at 5 different scenarios that you can commonly see on a truing stand when you're working with the wheel at, let's say, about the 3/4 point of tensioning. The first one is where the wheel is round, so it's not moving up and down, but it definitely is moving from left to right. The second scenario is when the wheel is neither laterally true nor round, and as we can see here, it's moving downward as it moves toward the left caliper and upward as it moves toward the right caliper. The third scenario is the opposite of the second one. The wheel is not true laterally or radially, and the rim is moving downward as it moves toward the right caliper and upward as it moves toward the left caliper. The fourth scenario occurs when the wheel is laterally true, that is, it's not moving from side to side. Radially, it's pretty good, except in one place the rim drops down and then moves back up again. And the fifth and last scenario is when the wheel is laterally true once again and radially pretty good, except in one place the rim hops up and then immediately moves back down again. Let's now look at each of the 5 scenarios and how to remedy the problem that's illustrated. In the first scenario, I have side-to-side wobble only, no up or down movement of the rim. This is what we saw in the opening clip. Initially, my calipers are too far away from the rim, so I move them up, and then I bring my calipers in until at one point the caliper just kisses the rim on one side. And we're showing this by a very slight rub. We want this to be a very, very short place on the rim where the caliper just kisses the rim. On the other side, I will have a slight gap. As we spin the rim, we'll see it go back and forth. And back to the right where we have our slight rub. To remedy that problem, I have to move the rim to the left. And I'm going to do that by loosening that spoke where the rub is by 1/4 of a turn, and on the opposite side of the wheel, going to the opposite flange, I'm going to tighten another spoke 1/4 of a turn. Each of those steps will move the rim to the left, but by combining them, I cancel out any up or down movement of the rim because the rim is already round, so we don't want to introduce a radial error in the process of trying to correct a lateral error. After I do that, my rub on the right caliper is gone, but the wheel is still not laterally true. However, it's better than it was. I move my calipers inward slightly until I get another kiss, a very slight rub, and then deal with that in the same way. The rub may or may not be at the same point. It makes no difference if it is. Just let the truing stand point to you where the problem is. It's very likely that at some point the slight rub will move to the left side, in which case you simply loosen a quarter of a turn where the rub is, and on a spoke going to the opposite flange, tighten 1/4 turn. Again, we're trying to preserve the roundness of the wheel. At some point, you will be satisfied that the left or right movement of the rim is very, very tiny and that the wheel is still round. And when you get to the point that that side-to-side movement or wobble is very tiny, it's okay to just tighten or loosen one side, because tiny corrections will not affect roundness. And so it's okay to adjust spokes also less than 1/4 of a turn. Whatever tiny amount of turning of the nipple will correct a very slight error is okay to do. This brings us to a second scenario, in which case I have a side-to-side wobble, and in addition to that, the wheel is slightly out of round. As the wheel spins, at one point in a revolution, the rim will rub on the left caliper, also at a lower point on the caliper. Opposite that, I have a gap at the right caliper, but the rim has also moved upward. And back to the rub on the left caliper. So here I want to try to solve two problems at once, or at least improve them. I need to move the rim both inward and upward, and I'm going to do that by tightening that spoke that goes to the opposite flange 1/4 of a turn. At that same point on the wheel, my rim will now have been moved up and over slightly. I won't have fixed my wheel, but I will have made a small improvement, so I once again spin my wheel. I'm going to move my calipers up and in. And I'm going to repeat the process until my wheel is both round and also laterally true. My third scenario is just like the second one, except that in this case the rim, as the wheel spins, moves downward to the right and upward to the left. Here I have to move my rim upward and to the left. So you tighten the spoke going to the opposite flange 1/4 of a turn, move the calipers in, and continue that process until the wheel is both laterally and radially true. The fourth scenario occurs when the wheel is laterally true, that is, it's not moving from side to side. Radially, it's pretty good, except in one place the rim drops down and then moves back up again. I'm going to move my calipers up until the caliper just kisses the rim at the low spot, and then I'm going to tighten each of the spokes at that point 1/4 of a turn, and hopefully that will bring the rim up at that point. And the fifth and last scenario is when the wheel is laterally true once again and radially pretty good, except in one place the rim hops up and then immediately moves back down again. I try to find the high point where the rim rises the most above the caliper, and then loosen each of the spokes 1/4 of a turn at the high point. Hopefully that will allow the rim to drop down slightly. As you are working on your wheel, you will be constantly diagnosing, using the truing stand, what's going on with either up or down, left or right movements. At some point, you'll probably find that the only problem left is a little bit of side-to-side wobble, in which case you'll just be dealing with very small movements of the rim from the left to the right. The question is, when is enough enough? When is your wheel good enough that you don't need to fool with it any longer? And that's really a question that depends on how meticulous you are. But I would point out one thing. The truing stand's job is to point out every little flaw in your wheel. In most cases, some of the things that you see when you're looking at the wheel in a truing stand will totally disappear when you take it out of the throwing stand. A common standard is that if you can get the wheel so that you have a lateral error of less than a half a millimeter and a radial error of less than half a millimeter, then you've done an acceptable job. The problem is that if you're a perfectionist like I am, you probably won't be able to stop yourself from trying to improve upon it even further. You may have noticed that I used the word hopefully in trying to remedy a problem of the wheel moving up or down at one point while being laterally true. In practice, this does not always work as well as it theoretically should, especially if there's already quite a lot of tension on the spokes. Try to remember this: when building a wheel, it is better to keep a wheel from getting out of round than to try to correct an out of round condition after it develops. There's no question that when you use a truing stand, some skill comes with practice. If you continue to work on your skills, you'll get better and better.